Hi, this is Tim Burton, and this is a commentary for Batman Returns. Here again, we were able to screw around with the logo, which was sort of, again, not really done too much. Like anything you make, you like to make it personal. So it was fun to work with Paul and Diane. So obviously a small little role, but, as the Penguin's parents, it was important. So, and that was Stuart Lancaster, who was in Faster Pussycat, Kill Kill, who was also in Edward Scissorhands in a small part. So, I like to make things as, personal as possible. I chose not to show the Penguin as a baby, just in the same way, like in the first movie, sort of the buildup of the Joker. It's like with all of these villains, it's nice to get either a bit of mystery beforehand or how they're created or how they become what they become. So, in the tradition of like what we did with the Joker, it felt, same to do with the Penguin and Catwoman.
Merry Christmas.
I think, always wanting to have movies with snow and winter, and it was as a reaction of coming from Burbank, where there was no weather. And so, yeah, it was a way for us to create weather in Burbank. So we shot this all in Los Angeles this time as opposed to London. And, in fact, we had to actually cool down the sets to about 30, I don't know, some degrees for the penguins, the real penguins that we used in the film. The whole title sequence was, again, trying to set the tone and the mood of the film. Uh, a lot of miniature work, a lot of elements, that, but again, important because it helps kind of set the tone of the movie. I was always a big fan of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. So, always that little moment before you dip down into that first, little waterfall. So again, you always try to use elements that have sort of meaning for you. I didn't decide after the first Batman that I wanted to do a sequel. I went on to do Edward Scissorhands for that, just because I didn't feel like, almost it's like kind of the last thing you want to do after you finish a movie is like go back and do it again. So I felt that, but after doing Edward Scissorhands and, started thinking about the characters like Catwoman and Penguin and Batman character and all, it just felt like, there's still things in there that I liked and loved and was interested in. So, uh, but I think if it had been right after the first one, I probably wouldn't have done it. And, you know, some people think I probably should have done the second one, but, I enjoyed, we switched locations, from shooting it in London to shooting it in Los Angeles. And so, there was some new elements that we added that sort of made it feel fresh and fresher and, made it seem worthwhile doing a sequel. I wouldn't really call it a sequel. It is basically another kind of chapter or, another episode, basically. I think I met Dan through Denise. He had they'd worked together on something, and he had a funny style of writing, and just again, it was trying to have a different take on the material without changing the tone of it too much. I mean, we wanted it to still be Batman and still have, a certain kind of feel, but, with a slightly different style of writing or whatever that just, gave it another angle. It had a different designer, Bo Welsh, this time, and it, no designer or even as for me as a director, I don't know, well, let's just copy this, we didn't do that on the first movie, and we didn't want to do it on this one. I mean, this one was more difficult because it was the first movie, but, we just felt, that, Bo, I think, did a different job, a different look while still kind of maintaining the flavor of what we felt Batman was. So, it's just a balance of trying to keep true to the spirit of it and also, create something new for yourself. Looking down the pecking order of Batman villains, you'd kind of, what I would pick is I would, first was the Joker for me. And then, started thinking about, I love Catwoman too. I think that she's a great one to be pitted against Batman. And, the Penguin, like from the TV series or the comics, he never really made sense to me as a character. But then we started thinking about this sort of, Batman, Catwoman, Penguin. I started to get into that idea of him, kind of going more, making him more freakish, making him actually more Penguin-esque and all. And then, thinking of Danny DeVito with that, and all of that. Just all of a sudden it clicked into me as a great villain, and somebody that just, it's like you've got three freaks, basically, three animal people, roaming the city. And, I like that aspect of it. The name Max Schreck, that goes back to sort of an homage to vampire movie way back in the early days. And Christopher Walken, just, like everybody, always been a fan of, and, especially, you sort of put him into the mix of these three sort of freakish animals, and he's the most human and yet sort of unhuman, whatever. It was just great. And he's just such a great actor. And he was just so amazing to work with. And he's just so kind of generous to the other actors, and I really enjoyed working with him.
I have a suggestion.
Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman was fantastic. I mean, she was just so great. I mean, after we did it, it was hard to think of, anybody else actually, doing it. And she was very impressive to me because she did things that were, just beyond good acting. Also, having to be put into the suit where she's basically vacuum packed into it. It's like could have stuck her in the freezer probably and thawed her out a couple of years later and she'd be fine. She was not the most comfortable thing, again, like the bat suit. And, she really, she was good, again, whipping, skipping around on rooftops in high heel shoes. I mean, pretty amazing.
I have enough signatures from Shrek employees alone to warrant a recall. That's not a threat, just simple numbers.
Maybe. But you don't have an issue, Max, and you sure as hell don't have a candidate.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
like the first movie, we tried to go with that sort of, you don't know what time it is in terms of year, keep it timeless, some contemporary references, obviously, but just the mixture of things to kind of keep it true to itself. The thing about Batman for me is always expressionist. So, even though there's different forms of that, there was expressionist in the first and in this, but this probably had expressionist with a bit more deco elements, art deco, the kind of Rockefeller Square Plaza kind of sort of simplicity and strength. So, even though it was expressionist, we used different influences.
I want to give some back.
The scene in the square with the attack on the lighting of the tree was complicated because it was all shot indoors. I mean, we basically, I think, had the largest stage at Warner's, but still, to try to do Batmobile and motorcycles and action, try to get some speed up and all that. It was difficult to do. But we did the best we could with the space that we had. Vincent is a friend of Danny's, and he, kind of went along with doing this. He's great. He's one of those guys that you see him and you just, such a great character actor. He doesn't have much of a social life. And again, with Michael and with Batman and the Batman character, we wanted to respect his privacy. Again, I think people kind of complain that, well, it's all about these other, and Batman's hardly in it and this and that. But I just again felt, less is more with him in the sense of who he is and again, just sort of respecting Batman's privacy. I think Michael was into it from the beginning. I don't think he had, my recollection is that he didn't have too many reservations except for just getting into the suit. But beyond that, I recall he was into it. The thing that maybe interested Michael was probably the thing that interested me, which is it's a new set of other characters to deal with, Penguin, Catwoman. With Batman, his psychological profile is what it is. So it's like, it's not like you want to bring necessarily new depths of torture, psychological torment, because that's what he's about. So I think it was just more a chance for him to respond to other types of characters in other situations. There were new elements to both the car and his costume. With his costume, it was slightly different. We took out the sort of the more realistic muscular and gave it a slightly more, kind of automotive kind of design. And then as, some new little ways to turn the car around without having to back it up. Michael's eyes, it goes back to kind of like silent movie acting. That's what I love about this material, or actually a lot of material. I like when people sort of just look, it's a movie. So it's like you kind of sometimes get more between the lines than you do the actual lines. Michelle, again, was just good at finding a certain kind of identifiability with the character, heightened reality, but she's always tried to find a certain kind of reality in the situation. So again, it really, a kind of person and acting really helps the film, I think. I enjoyed her performance extremely. I mean, and watching her go through those transformations and, being sort of a put upon employee, which a lot of us have felt, and then sort of blossoming and sort of transformation. It's just, I don't know, definitely could identify with. Just statues and things. I mean, it's sort of, again, kind of taking off of that idea of what happens in your other places where things just get built upon other things sometimes, so it becomes a real sort of hodgepodge of what, designs and styles and things. So, we started to enter the phase of like, well, they built this and then they sort of put this on that and they didn't take that down, just kind of things added upon each other. The old Central Park Zoo, we decided to build a model again because it allows you the ability to move, which was nice to kind of create almost like a flying bat or whatever, move through the architecture and all, which again, it allows us, it allows you to kind of go a little further with the design when you could make a model, because it just gives it a certain reality, so you can kind of push it a little bit more. I love doing the model work just because, especially with buildings, because it's hard to, it's hard to do. I mean, even the best matte painting, it's hard, to do and, be able to move and, blow up, do what you need to do to kind of, make it work and all. Sets and models help the actors very much, I think. You're able to see it, touch it, feel it, and again, in these kind of fantasy type things, I think it always helps. I think with the Penguin character, it wasn't one of my favorite characters from the comics, because to me it was just like a little guy with a, top hat, purple hat and a tuxedo, and called the Penguin. And since, from the first Batman, we always decided to kind of try to give each of the villains, a real psychological profile, as opposed to just, here's a funny looking guy in a hat and a tuxedo. So that's when we got into the idea of giving him a backstory of, what we did, of the abandonment, this a little deformed, freakish creature, abandoned, down in the sewer, the circus, the circus motif and the freak show motif, the real penguin motif, just to kind of give him something that felt was in the spirit of the other villains and other characters. And Danny, was really into it. Again, I don't know how much of this kind of makeup acting or mask acting Danny had done. And I think like Jack, he really enjoyed that aspect of it. I mean, he really became the Penguin. I mean, you would just, kind of, everybody was kind of afraid of him on the set a little bit, because they think he might bite his finger, if you got too close to him or something. He was in character most of the time, and not in a negative way, because Danny always has a sense of fun, but he definitely was in character, and people were definitely kind of freaked out and frightened of him. Because Danny's a director and producer, and has been through so much. He's a great spirit to have on the set. He knows what's going on, and it's all this difficult, stuff and makeup. This one was probably more difficult to make than the first. It's more technically difficult with the real penguins and the cooled down sets, and we didn't have as much of an outside. We did have a little bit of backlot in this, but it was more interior stage work.
Well, let's start.
It was a very difficult set to shoot because this was like a little island, so we had to, put, build bridges across or wade across, and make sure that the temperature was right, and get the penguins, march them out there and get them into the water, and just the mixture of makeup and getting into the bats, all that kind of, it's like trying to get, push a large boulder up a hill.
If there were such documents, that's not an admission. I would have seen to it they were shredded.
The stuff coming out of the penguin's mouth. I mean, we just wanted to make him just a horrible little character, and I described, and they were cool enough. I mean, they didn't. I think the people that had the most trouble with it was the tie-in people. It was like, well, we can't have a character that's got black stuff coming out of his mouth, can we? I mean, it's like, I didn't, again, you think, you don't realize people fixate on certain things, which, for me, was really not that big a deal.
And you want to agree to the other body parts? Remember, Max, you flush it, I flaunt it.
You know what, Mr. Penguin, sir?
I think perhaps I could help orchestrate a little welcome home scenario for you. Once we're both back home, perhaps. Help each other.
You won't regret this, Mr. Shrek.
With this set, her apartment, we wanted to make it sad, and kind of girlish, that's why it's kind of pink, but it's kind of a faded, kind of sad pink. So, Bo did a really good job of kind of, capturing, with all the sets, it's like you want to capture the character as well, because it's part of the character, and you're not long in these places. So it's something that, we put a lot of thought into.
What? How can anyone be so pathetic? Yes, to you I seem pathetic, but I'm a working girl. Gotta pay the rent. Maybe if you were chipping in instead of stepping out.
This kind of movie, you're shooting all over the place. So luckily, with good actors, and Michelle was really good at, I think, charting her character, because you're shooting all out of sequence. You're a cat. Now you're back to Selena. Now you're Selena pre, accidents after. So she had a lot to go through. But I mean, I think she again was great at finding the reality of that kind of sad person who just works all the time and is sort of put down by her boss and her mother and her life, and lives that sort of sad existence. So she got that. So no matter how out of order we were shooting, she seemed to be really right there. Annette Bening was cast first, and she'd done, costume fittings. I mean, she would have been great. She did costume fittings, and then get a call one day, and it was pretty close to shooting, I recall, and saying that she couldn't do the movie because she was pregnant, and I was like, congratulate. It's like I was really happy for her, but then at the same time I'm going, oh yeah. And but things have a way. You always have to take a sort of fate approach to things. Michelle came into it then, and again, now I can't think of anybody. She was 100% right there right away, and I just, I really enjoyed her performance. The shot of Michelle at her desk before Max comes in, I think we were just Stefan was sort of playing around with the lights or whatever, and this sort of shadow came across Michelle, which gave a real cat-like kind of look, which was, kind of planned, kind of not planned, but, sort of turned out then to look planned, but it was a nice little, free cat image. The happy accidents are always the things that are the most fun because, again, these kind of movies are so laborious. It's like any spontaneity, anything that comes that's sort of quick and, surprising, is much appreciated.
Nobody?
This is one of my favorite scenes, actually. I don't know. There's something about the overall thing about it that just makes that I like it. Some of these quieter moments, and he's just he just got such power, and it's just nice to see two actors together. These kind of movies, you don't get that opportunity doesn't happen that much in these kind of movies at the time. So these two, this kind of thing was kind of one of my favorites because it's just simple. In real life, Christopher, he's a great guy. Yeah, he's really funny. He was just such has such a presence on screen, and perhaps because of my Jack Palance experience, I was a little like, oh, is there going to be one like we're going to have this on every film? But this is one of the things that impressed me about Michelle was her eyelid technique here, opening her eyes at the end of the sequence. When she did it, people are going to think this is like a weird special effect, that we did something to your eyes. But this was one of the things that impressed me extremely about her. This and having the bird fly out of her mouth later on, we're like, I will forever be impressed by her. Her eye action, it always looked like a weird special effect to me, and it's beautiful. Did that all naturally. Yeah. I always thought she should have gotten a special Academy Award for weird eye move, But the origins of the Catwoman with all the cats, just to give it a slightly mystical quality, and again tie it to the animals, which with Batman with bats and Catwoman with cats and penguins, just gives it that more both. It's both psychological and sort of fable like, where you kind of tie the two things together.
Helena, this is your mother.
I enjoyed this sequence because it's just an actor kind of going, this is where she just finally snaps. And, again, she did it. She must have gone through something like this because she definitely was good, It's kind of like one of those things where you don't rehearse, you just shoot it and then watch her go, because it's not something where you can plan it. I think everybody was kind of pretty impressed by her, and then kind of didn't want to go up and really talk to her after this or give her a few minutes to kind of. These sequences, I don't think we did many takes because we didn't need to. She got it. My recollection is that it wasn't a lot of takes, a few perhaps, but these are the kind of scenes that once you see somebody gets it, you don't really keep going because they get it. The design of the Catwoman costume came basically, you look at Catwoman as a sort of female counterpoint to Batman. So you kind of want to, you want to give them that in a different way that you give like the Joker and Batman, that sort of reverse. Catwoman and Batman are similar thing, although different. And it's a male female version of a counterpoint. And, so just sort of, I like the shiny texture on her, so with Bob, again, this was something that was important to us to find the right texture. And I know Bob, we really Bob Ringwood, we looked at a lot of textures to kind of come up with the right sheen. And I like the stitching idea because that sort of, that to me made it like, just somebody, it was a visual image of somebody being sort of patched together, somebody who was just fragmented, mentally, and just sort of put an image to that, with the stitching and all. As the movie goes on and the costume unravels, she unravels. And so, again, I always try to use the costume and the sets as a character thing. Danny's score in this, it was the same challenges as in the other departments with the art department, wardrobe, and everybody, really. It's like keeping it to Batman, but, for all of us, it's like, well, what do we do, different, but still keep it Batman? And so Danny kept the Batman theme, and then he had a few, new characters to give themes to. So it was, it made it interesting for him, so it wasn't like he was doing the same thing. And I think he got into it for the same reasons that we all did, which is, new characters and new situations.
But again, I'm not really one for speeches, so I'll just say thanks.
The move from London to shooting in LA was different just because of the difference of location. It made it, I can't say it made it any easier for me. I mean, in some ways it was a more difficult shoot. Being around in the studio where it's all happening, you're just more aware of it, and it's happening more. So I didn't really enjoy that very much. And, you're making a movie, you can be anywhere. So being in Los Angeles didn't necessarily help me at all. Except for just a change of location. I mean, that was probably it. The weather, because since we had to hold down the sets, it was like being in England anyway, so we were almost in the same weather, we'd be at 80-degree weather, and we coming out of stages, people would be going, dressed in shorts, seeing people coming out with parkas on, it's like, what's going on in there, with these huge air conditioners outside the stages. So, we were trying to, I guess, create a little bit of England in Los Angeles. I recall the studios always, which I agree with, try not to let too much out, keep it as quiet as possible. I'm always in agreement with that. So, I think that's sort of the beginning days of starting, no one on the set without a pass, that kind of a thing. But I think the studio had a sort of a sense of wanting to keep things private. The themes of Batman, again, about, somebody who is damaged, but is basically good, but perceived as bad sometimes, perhaps, there's a duality that all of the characters have. And again, that to me is what's inherent in the Batman material. All of the best characters have a yin and yang side, light and dark, with hell, the flamboyant, and flip sides of the same coin. And, you look for those connections, or I did with this, because it just, again, makes it more personal. I mean, anytime, why do people, usually when people are adversaries, there is a similarity. Otherwise they wouldn't care, I mean, it's interesting, you could even, say that in modern times, like where people are enemies, you can always find a common ground. And that's why they almost hate each other, that there's some kind of common ground there. So that's that, and you could see that it made it very clear to me when we decided to go that way with the Penguin, that there was a relation and a connection with the Batman character and Catwoman character, really. The relationship with Bruce Wayne and Alfred, it's kind of like the classic, it shows both that he's lost his parents, but also it's that sort of fantasy of, having a mother, father, a servant all in one kind of a thing. And always with them, we wanted to give the impression that it was a long, so you just see little snippets of things that will make you think that it's, that it is a relationship, that it's not just two people, a butler and a guy that he just sees every so often. That was one of, I think, the good fantasies of the original material is that kind of relationship. He's the one that has to deal with the duality, and kind of try to weirdly normalize it, and give, Batman, him a sort of a human face, give him a human connection, because he's really the only one that he can relate to. Him sort of roaming around at night was an interesting moment because, again, it was like it felt very lonely to me. You know what I mean? It was just like this guy cruising the streets, and you kind of get the impression like, well, maybe, the people he's kind of accepted, but, nobody's rushing out to say hi. I mean, it's like, so that sort of low rumble, you can imagine people kind of looking out their windows going, oh, gee, be quiet. There was a few tiny little things like that maybe weren't, in the first film. The sadness in the Batman character is that all, the villains get to come out and play where he's got to keep a lid on it. I mean, so I think there's a loneliness to that character and a withheldness. And, and I think, at least in my opinion, a lot of people misinterpret that. They just go, well, oh, he's not in the movie that much, or it's really all about Batman or maybe Catwoman or the Penguin. And when in fact, like I said before, he's a character that is sad and is private and is, and can't come out really, to play, so to speak. And, so I think, if I were to look back on it, go like, oh, we should have added, I wouldn't know where to do it really, because I feel like, he is in it the right kind of amount in a certain way for me. The duality issue becomes, probably even more, but not confusing, but in this, because I mean, there really is a duality. I mean, he's a bad kind of scary guy, but he also, there's a sadness to this character as well, and, that's what I like about it. It sometimes causes confusion, like, well, are we supposed to like him or supposed to hate him or whatever? But, I find with these kind of characters, and there's another level of it for me because I end up loving these characters. So there's like, they're bad, they're sad, and I love them. So it's like, they're kind of like, well, some weird kind of thing comes out of it. You feel for him, but he's also pulling one over on everybody. So, I mean, again, I'm not sure he even knows where he's turning it on or where it's real or where he's just trying to pull one over on him, but, that kind of not knowing, again, for me makes it more interesting. It's like, well, is he really mean it or does he not? It kind of, to me, kind of helps it. Danny wore different shoes to give him a heavier limp, lesser of a limp, they all had, they all had shoes for different, rooftop shoes. I mean, there were all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I just love a big, strong man who's not afraid to show it.
I think this was Michelle's first scene as Catwoman, if I recall. And, this is where, just knew right away that she was just, the look of her intensity and just her ability. I mean, I think to me, she looks incredible. I mean, it's just the way she lit and her eyes and the costume and just her confidence, her just knew right away. I mean, to me, as far as I'm concerned, she's never looked better. This was an opportunity to see a little bit of Bruce Wayne as a businessman, which we hadn't really seen before. And, Michael's very good at just keeping it real and low key. And it was nice to kind of see that for me anyway, because you actually get a little bit of that sort of the Batman kind of the straightforwardness in his sort of business dealings, and I thought he was good at that. Michael is great because, I mean, well, when I first worked with him on Beetlejuice, I learned from that experience that he's got a lot. There's a nervous energy about him that's just like even when he's just standing there looking, there's electricity about him, which again is why we want him for Batman, because it's all about that. And he's good at improv, Michael. He's a surprising actor, and even like in these looks, he can be kind of funny without overdoing it. He's good at capturing the right tone of something, both dramatic and humorous, and sometimes at the same time.
In this office.
Yeah.
Again, these are some of my favorite scenes because it's like actors and, they're not burdened with their wardrobes. And, I think they enjoyed it too, probably. It was a nice vacation from their costumes. Michelle has to go through so many different sort of psychological levels. And this is, again, after her trauma, but seeing her as Selena, but traumatized. And so it was an interesting balance for Michelle. But again, I thought she did it really good. It's like, does she know? Does she not? Do we, she kind of keeps everybody guessing about things. And which is, you see it on their faces here. It's like, it's really, really, it's really, really good because she's got that kind of like that almost post-nervous breakdown. I don't care what happens. And she did that really, really good. I think Bruce is thrown by pretty much anything. He keeps a lid on his personality in social occasions and, he never really has a chance. So if anybody gets anywhere close, I think it probably raises the alarm bells. I think they knew each other. I don't know if they'd worked together before, Michael and Michelle, but they seem pretty comfortable, and of course, again, on a movie like this, where it's a fantasy and, unreal, all these actors are looking for any kind of connection, that can make it feel a bit more real, and then always appreciated that, especially when it comes to like characters like this, you have to work, I think, a little extra hard to kind of find some reality in it. And it's not even reality as we perceive it. It's its own reality. That's kind of a funny thing to try to find.
She tries to blackmail me.
We were looking for somebody, and strangely enough, Andrew, both the casting found that he had a weird kind of quality that he looked like could be Christopher Walken's son on steroids or something, kind of this big kind of, there's something in his eyes that had a weird quality that just made us all kind of feel like he could be Christopher Walken's son. And, he just had an interesting quality to him. I don't know if Danny was a big sushi fan before this, but he is now. And Now he went for it. I think this was one of the first scenes we shot with him as well up here. But no, he went for the. You can't fake something like that. No, he's got to. His suit, we found. I mean, I always preferred it with the coat on because he was actually so much more disgusting without his suit. But it just showed off his physique a little bit. Just now he chowed down. There's no question.
God knows I know.
The color palette of the film, again, is, we went mainly for the Batman darks and shadows. In this scene, it was obviously, it's meant to be much more of a positive, up with people, kind of young Republican, happy, positive headquarters. So we went for the more bright color scheme in this particular sequence.
Ken?
It's like a bit of like, okay, we never got this from the beginning. What was with the top hat and the cigarette holder? This just we thought was just sort of pure Penguin. I mean, I don't know, a little joke before the campaign kicks off, another nice shot of his physique. I never felt, again, bad about this. I mean, I grew up on movies on TV that were much worse than this. So I had a different sort of take on it. I think as the years go on, people sort of get more politically correct. And here we are in a little political scene and we're trying to use it just all felt part of it for me. I personally never had a problem with it. He's been in the sewer a long time. He's a character that hasn't had a lot of action. Although, I can't say that. There were a couple of the circus people that weren't too bad looking.
You asshole.
With all the characters, you try to shoot them as what their character is or how other people perceive them. So certain lenses or angles in terms of making them look bigger or smaller or more imposing. You just take it case by case with whatever the character or characters there are in the scene. The design of the Penguin was sort of a back and forth kind of a thing. I mean, I'd come up with something, my sketches were pretty crude, but with the idea of the kind of freakish kind of idea about it. And, but it was kind of the same on Suzanne. Stan and his group were really good at sort of making it real, taking this stuff and fleshing it out. with the stunt work, Michael, again on this one, I think he even wanted, do more because he was, you're going to get in this costume, so he did some work with the people and he was good at, because he gets this, again, the strength of it and what it needs to be. So, he did as much as he could. It was right at the beginning of digital, so we had a few digital, a couple like the bats early on and things were just the beginnings of going digital, but just the very beginning. The cat motif in the Shrek cat, basically, not so much Felix, but I think more just that sort of evil businesses that have cute, I don't know, America has a history of, be it Bob's Big Boy or, Lucky Charms, whatever cute characters selling big corporations. Michelle did a lot of training and she really did learn how to use a whip expert. I mean, she really was good. She did mostly all of this stuff and she could do it. I mean, that was her, and she, not easy, whip. It's a funny form, and, cause I tried it a little bit and it's not easy. And to kind of then do the kind of end flourishes that she does with it. And again, too, in high heels on slippery floors, I was quite amazed.
Don't hurt us, lady. Our take home's less than 300.
You're overpaid. Hit the road.
I guess there was some controversy that in this scene, Batman was killing somebody, but I never felt like that was really crossing a line, because especially in this movie, maybe it just felt a bit more cartoonish slightly, and it didn't feel like overly mean-spirited. It didn't feel like he was focusing on it, and therefore those elements combined, it didn't feel like it was crossing a line to me. And also, you don't see it and you don't really know, and basically the explosion looks kind of pathetic anyway. It's not, it's kind of firecrackery anyway. It didn't feel like it was crossing the line. Like the first movie, this one, Michael, we both talked about keeping him minimal. I mean, I think Batman had more dialogue, and I think Michael found, sometimes the dialogue, it was best to keep him as short and as minimal as possible. If there was a word that didn't mean anything or was saying too much, we just decided to take it out, because again, it's that keeping him, like, the less he says, the better, because why would he want, more he talks, somebody's going to go, oh, that's him, or, just keep hidden. So, I don't know what percentage, but I think, he did pare it down. We did pare it down some. It was a real juggling act because we had so many more new characters in this, I mean, I think one of the biggest problems in a movie like this is you're trying to balance the new characters with the old characters, and I'll give them, even lesser characters like Commissioner Gordon, everybody gets shortchanged in a movie like this, and so it was a difficult balancing act, and also taking the tactic, like I said, what we did with showing the creation of these characters, that takes up time, and therefore that's time that other characters aren't getting. That's the great thing about comics. I mean, one comic will focus on the creation of Catwoman or the creation of Penguin, or so these movies, you are throwing a lot into the mix into one thing. This was a fun fight because again it's sort of physical, makes their internal conflict physical, and seeing the two different textures together, the sort of shiny and the sort of more matted texture of Batman, it was I don't know, those kind of visuals are exciting to me, and also just make it their character points as well. I guess this is probably about as close to product placement as I come, the kitty litter product placement.
Saved by kitty litter.
With this movie, didn't, with all the other characters, again, didn't find a place for Robin. I mean, I think I was always against it. And again, we didn't really we abandoned it pretty quickly, any thought of it, just because of all the other characters. For all these months, Danny, he definitely was the Penguin. On and off the set.
The mayor's baby.
This next scene the scene with Catwoman and Penguin, I enjoyed very much too, because it was it was just a scene between them and kind of their scene. So it was just, seeing these characters together, especially when you're shooting your months and you just see one, you're dealing with one and one and the other. This was an opportunity for them both, and it was fun to stage because you're just doing it sort of simply and just letting two great actors, do their thing. It was difficult to light this movie. It took time just because of all the things involved with it. It did take its time. It was difficult to deal with. Not only her, just everybody. And then you throw in an animal in there, a real animal, and cats. But the other thing that impressed me about her most of all was, the bird flying out of her mouth. Everybody always thinks that is an effect, when in fact she and it was all safe, all, but she put the bird in her mouth, closed it for like several seconds and let it fly out. And again, I was extremely impressed with that. It's so kind of shocking to me that it looks phony, but I'll never forget her, put the bird in her mouth, rolling, put the bird in her mouth, making sure, closing her mouth for several seconds and then letting it out. Like, weird. Michelle or Danny never, I felt, went over the top. I think that they both knew what they were doing, and I never remember saying, pull it back a bit, or ever. Never. No. Because, you look at these shots and you see Michelle, and she just, they both, it's like they knew what their character was. They got it. I definitely love that scene.
My arm.
Gets to be on a bed with Michelle Pfeiffer in a, rubber suit, There are worse ways to spend your day, I guess. I think what Michelle was trying to do with the Catwoman character was just, it's that after that sort of breakdown catharsis, it just have a kind of a confidence, a sort of a person coming into themselves, sort of after some sort of trauma or whatever, making yourself a whole person, or letting the things that you've repressed in your life for your whole life come out. And, even though she's still fragmented, it's that aspect of a person that's confident, an individual, and secure. But it doesn't last long. With Michael, that's why he was, for me, right for the role again, is that he just, the combination of focus and distraction and intensity and pent up, anger and energy, was, that's all the traits that the character needs and needed. And the humor, Michael has humor without it becoming a joke, and that's what I appreciated about him as well. He's able to take that distraction and sadness and loneliness and intensity, but then also have a bit of humor without it calling too much attention to itself. The first movie, we were able to do this backstory a little bit, which we didn't have to do it with this one, which was good because of all the other characters too. Having to do that plus the characters would have made it real tough.
Somewhere.
Tree lights up and
casting, it's always fun, and especially for these small parts. You want to get somebody that can capture, and like the Ice Princess Christie, I think, she. I'm not sure she'd ever been an ice prince, a beauty queen, but she certainly got what that was all about, and it's what you try to get people that can have that come across quickly because it needs to. I didn't feel a need to really connect the two films, but there were a couple of perhaps more inside, I wouldn't say inside jokes, but connective things. The mentioning of Vicky, and a little later on when he mentions, who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave. That was a definite response to the response from the the purists. But I enjoyed this scene because, again, it was a chance to see two people, and without their costumes on. And again, I don't think as a scene we shot overshot too much, just because they were good. No, and I like the image of them almost finding each other's wounds and that they had given to each other. To me, was a good moment. They both were really good at taking a scene. This movie had a different style of humor in it, I think, than the first, a little bit. And, but I feel like they were both really good at kind of, again, it's kind of one running out one way, then the other, kind of playing the comedy of it, but not overdoing it. I think that, never wanted it to turn into like a farce or a campy kind of thing, or, parody kind of a thing. It had more to do with their own absent-mindedness or like freaked out nature than it did with any kind of slapstick kind of a thing. It was great to have Michael Gough back in the second movie, because to me he was just so much a part of the material. I mean, from the first movie, and for me, again, growing up watching him, I felt that way about him. So it was easy to feel that in the movie, this sort of connection. And then if you ever met Michael, he's an amazing man. So he really, it comes across even stronger. It's like you wish he was Alfred. You wish he was with you in a certain way.
Make up a
this sort of juxtaposition of Batman changing and her changing again just points out he's been at it a little bit longer than her. But also just the nature. We always were trying to think of the male, female, kind of generalizations. I wouldn't call them cliches, but this sort of the sort of anal ordered. I mean, there are anal ordered males and females, but he's more of the anal and she's just more new to it and a bit more of that kind of all over the place quality, which I liked. The Batmobile shielding up was probably one of, actually the first digital effects I've ever dealt with, so it was really relatively new to the effects world, that kind of stuff. Circuses, I'm not quite sure what my fascination is because I actually never liked going to the circus. It's probably more of a fear of clowns and a kind of a fear of the circus, perhaps. I can't say as I enjoyed it as a child, and I know no one person that finds a clown funny, and yet there they are. So I think it has more to do with the fear of it than the love of it. Not only did we have a lot more characters in this, we had a lot more animals, which made it even more difficult. I mean, and we had some children too, so babies and children and animals and costumes. I mean, I don't know what else we could have added, to make it more difficult, really. The penguins were on the set, the air conditioning had to go up, if we had the kids on the set, we had to turn the air conditioning down, it was all over the place. It was a challenge for Stefan and the lighting crew because it was difficult, and a lot of these on rooftops, it was hard to light, and I think they did it deceivingly. It kind of comes across seamless, but it was deceiving. And I said the setups on this took longer than some films worked on. And it's hard, behind the master light with eyes and again, these are probably some of the first CG things ever dealt with. Michelle to be as graceful and actually as effortless as she looks. I mean, that's the funny thing about this. If anybody were there on the set and see how much effort she had to go through to get this and then do kind of just a real confident, sexy, seamless performance, it makes me laugh when I watch it because, she's on slanted rooftops with the high heels and whipping and doing it beautifully and acting, and you can read her expressions and all. I mean, it was very exciting to see.
maybe.
I was not happy during production because it's not a happy, I mean, it's a funny thing to say because you're happy to be doing the work. You're happy to be working with the actors, and you're happy to be working with the crew, and you're happy to be doing it. You know, that there's a joy about creating something that's your happiness. And beyond that, though, it's a miserable nightmare. This movie was a challenge, and it did feel different to me from the first one. Although, you know, again, trying to keep true to the spirit, so it did keep it fresh for me. It did make it feel like we were making something slightly different, and that was important to me. And I just because, you know, the idea of just doing the same thing did not appeal to me. But I probably got into trouble a little bit for it because, you know, once you do one thing, then there's these expectations, and, you know, you're never quite sure what those are. And like I said, with the marketing and fast food tie-ins and this and that all were springing up, that made it, you know, just, and then I think the studio going through it once, then going through it again, their angst was up a notch, you know, another level of like, well, you know, they seem more afraid on this one than they were on the first one, you know, just because I think anytime you're doing something first off, you're kind of more fearless because you don't, you know, you're entering the unknown, and somehow the known, it makes it feel like a bigger burden and a bigger challenge and more pressure somehow. So, I felt, and I don't know if it was just being there at the studio or all of the elements combined, it did feel like there was a strange, new type of pressure, but it didn't stop me from, you know, doing what we wanted to do. The studio was always at the end of it all supportive, and they did, you know, even though they may not have liked the black stuff coming out of his mouth, you know, they were very, you know, supportive of the thing for me. The Batman, you know, when he flies off the roof, wingspan thing. I mean, you know, we were always looking for ways to kind of create that bat image. And I remember, you know, from the first one, we were trying to, you know, get a nice wingspan and get, you know, without doing it, you know, there was no CG then, and this was just the beginning. And you know, we still wanted to keep it real, but wanted to kind of try to give him a slightly more bigger wingspan and just, you know, slightly more, see some more of the mechanics of the kind of things that he does. So it was always just a way to try to get the best bat image we could. And so, you know, this way we tried to just give him a slightly larger wingspan. The problem always, wherever we were, whether it was England or America, was the space for the Batmobile. The Batmobile was always had more power than space that we had. So, you know, there would be a couple of shots where actually in both films where we went out on the open road to kind of just get some speed on it. But these shots all were on like in the back lot of Warner Brothers. So, you know, there's only so much space. But, you know, we just, again, did the best we could with the space we had. Being in that wardrobe, that costume for the Penguin costume, and the amount of time he had to sit there in the makeup chair, you know, I think this was a way to unleash all the stuff that was pent up inside.
Prince of Gotham!
Even though I'm not an action director, I would say, you know, there's a certain amount that's required in these, and, you know, it seems appropriate. And, you know, this is no, you know, tried to put enough in to where, you know, it satisfies, you know, everybody that's into that, you know. That's why I always try to give it some other, take on it, because I'm not really an action director. Tried to find, these little things like the car turning, changing, or seeing something new with the Batmobile, just to kind of give it another element. Again, it's a real heightened reality, but even, fixing the car, all the gadgets and stuff. I mean, with Michael, even the way he's looking here, you just try to give it a little bit of reality, like things don't always work. Things aren't all, just to give it a human quality. We shot mainly at Warner Brothers, but since we needed so much stage space, we had a couple of big stages at Universal, I think. And, most of it was on stage because we had to, cool down a lot for, try to give it a winter. And I even without the Penguin, since we had the air conditioners, I tried to keep it cool in there to get, breath, whatever we could. There's a couple of sequences where you can see it, not all the time but where you could see breath, and just to try to make it feel a little bit more real. It also helped with Danny being in that outfit. I mean, I think he was the only person that actually appreciated the cold in there, because he's wearing 100 pounds of rubber.
We celebrate tonight my annual masquerade ball, Shrek and Cobblepot, the visionary lions.
We're taking time to ensure the safety of our fair city. Did the mayor have a plan? No. He realized
It wasn't a conscious decision to make it like the first one, like a gangster, and this one more like a political drama or whatever. It just happened that way, and so that for sort of give a little indication of one entrance into the Batcave on this one.
Body shop, isn't it? Security? Who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave?
The comment about Vicky Vale in the Batcave really was, aimed at all the angry people that were angry about the first one. The Iron Maiden is a torture device, so, him being a tortured individual, and, you could see him sort of probably having a collection. I remember in the first movie, we had collections of weird costumes and weird weapons and things, and you could see him sort of connecting to that on some level, emotionally, and just thought that would be a good image, one of the entrances to the Batcave.
personal glory. No.
We always tried with the Penguin, just treat him who he is, and he's a short guy, so he's going to be behind the pedestal and not make him what he isn't. And then I like seeing him peeking through the microphones like that. We looked for any connection where we could do that with Alfred and Bruce, just any little, because there wasn't much time for it.
Well, just relax. I'll take care of the squealing, wretched, pinhead prince of Gotham. I didn't say that.
With the Batcave, it's like with all the designs, it's like we wanted to be kind of true to what the spirit of Batman was, but Bo's a great designer, and we didn't want to just like go and copy. None of us did. So, it was an opportunity to just try something else, and again keep it the same tone, the same kind of obelisk black rock, kind of dark feel to it. All these villains, I find, the great villains all have a tragedy about them, I think. I mean, from watching Disney movies on, you always love the villains. I mean, or monster movies. I always love the monsters because, all the great monsters are tragic. All the great villains have a tragic quality. So, we just, even Batman as a hero is tragic. So, that's why I like this material. There's an operatic tragedy, really, the whole thing. The duck car came from the image of, this old dilapidated zoo amusement park. And so, just culling elements from what his environment was, and this was probably like an old Gotham World's Fair that had been run down, and you actually see it in the flyover shots, the kind of little duck cars rides. And so, we just tried to think that, he would use his elements. Here again, the duality of like an animal person who wants to be a person. Now he's reverting back to his animal form. And, so it's again, duality of, did he really want to come out, or not, or is he just the bad? And playing that all the way through, he didn't want to make him just completely tragic. Otherwise it tips the balance, but it's a tricky balance to find anyway.
Penguin?
There were both mechanical penguins and real penguins, mainly real penguins though. But a mixture of both. This, kind of harken back to kind of what sort of Phantom of the Opera kind of theme. The cost, the masked ball. Again, it's certainly not subtle symbolism. People behind masks. But you can get away with more kind of, I think, kind of simplistic, symbolism. It's kind of fun in these kind of movies, where it's pretty, more obvious. And then all of the masks, and then the only two people aren't, and are the ones that are usually wearing them. And so it was interesting. And again, it was always nice to see them out of their outfits every now and then. The great thing about both of them, they can both look crazy without much trouble. I was a big fan of Susie and the Banshees, so and we needed something for the scene, and I was just a fan of theirs, and so it was like a way to kind of just like kind of meet them and let them do something. My favorite scenes in this are probably the ones where it's just the actors together. I like the scene with Michelle and Christopher when she gets pushed out the window. I like the scene with Danny and Michelle, Catwoman, and Penguin. I like the scenes with Michelle and Michael, when they're together here at the dance, and when they're alone together. I like the show, the things with like Michael, the first thing with when you see the insignia, he's just alone there, sitting there. That to me is just almost a shot, but it's like a nice, powerful moment for me. And again, I always appreciated, I said it on the last one, I say it on this one, to take this material and, which at the time, comic book material at the time didn't have the sort of what you call status necessarily that it does now. I mean, Superman had a status, but that had been a long time ago, and so I was lucky to have actors treat it seriously and take it not like a joke, and it gives it something that just is what makes it for me. Like Thunderbirds are go, 100 people hooked up to a wire, ready to. That took a while to do. Not a day, but probably close to. Because it was flying. It was all real. It was flying glass and explosives and everything. Which you. That's the great thing about these things is like you see images like that, like Danny coming out of the floor, cloud of smoke on his duck. It's like no matter how bad the shoot's going, you're kind of going, okay, this is all worth it. These surreal images that come out every now and then. All of these guys in this movie, they did a very good job about not showing everything. I mean, they kind of show you things and then they don't show you things. And, Christopher's great at that as well. You you want to know what's going on in his mind, and then you kind of don't want to know what's going on in his mind. And that's what I think creates their power as an actor. It's like you see a lot going on and you're not quite sure what it is. You kind of know, you think you know, but then you don't know. And that's why they're so great. I like working with actors that like could have been in silent movies, you know, people that just look at the camera and tell the story. I love Christopher, like with his little papers. I love penguins. I've always wanted to work with penguins. They're some of my favorite animals. Adopted several penguins. Or several penguin charities, because I do find them to be beautiful, elegant animals. Unlike the penguin himself, is not quite as elegant. Since we had them, we tried to use reel as much as possible. Again, digital was in its early days, so there's not, now they just go, let's just do it all CG. Although I would have still fought against that to some degree, but, it definitely was in its early stages, so it only could do it in a few shots. But again, it was mainly real, some CG and some mechanicals. We did the bat plane in the first one, and so now since we're underground a little bit, it said, we have the Batmobile, why not have, the bat boat, we got the bat boat, the bat helicopter, the bat cycle, and just given the way the story was, decided to make it the boat just because it it seemed like since it was taking place in some, water environments and underground environments, it was appropriate.
Penguin Army approaching launch destination at Gotham Plaza.
We always gave him a little bait and stuff to have, a little bucket next to him that he could chow anytime he wanted to. Animals dressed in funny costumes. I guess that always stems from when you're a child dressing up your dog in clothes, It's like it just sort of continues on.
Estimated casualties after launch, 100,000 people.
As I said before, being in the makeup for so long, when he'd come out, he'd be ready for action. So whether he was, delivering his patent speech or just the sort of energy that it would come through, it was long pent up, for sure. Not seeing it in so long, I'm I'm enjoying it. I mean, it's just like, it looks strange, I mean, again, I think what I come away with, what you do kind of finally come away with so many years away, is the pain of the actual shooting leaves you, and then you're just sort of looking at the actors and kind of just admire, that's what you retain from, what I retain from it is just working with them and seeing them do their thing. That shot looked a little like Batman through the car wash. We didn't take it. No, we did not take the bat plane to a car wash and shoot that. It just looks that way. The more angry he got, the more black stuff. And then at the end, it all kind of unleashes. It wasn't easy getting that duck up those stairs either. The exterior of the Penguin player, it was on stage. Again, all of these, except for a little bit of the Batmobile stuff, backlot was staged. So there was, I'd say, a much more large percentage stage work on this one than the first one. Again, both for mainly because of the weather situation.
Because I'm a genuine freak. You have to work.
You might be right.
What it all comes down to is who's holding the umbrella.
We changed the bat suit too. Again, kept it similar, but took out the kind of muscle, the sort of realistic muscular thing and gave it a more kind of streamlined, almost sort of automotive design kind of quality to it. It was a bit more sculptural and not quite as sort of realistic, but again, didn't want to go so far with it as to make give him a, turn Batman in a white suit or a, different colored underwear, Again, did all these live, and that set, the Penguin's Lair was at Universal because that was the only other big stage that was big enough to kind of. That shot there, Christopher, the monkey starting to freak out again. Again, this is why it's best to do miniatures because you can't blow up matte paintings, although you can, but it doesn't look very good. And again, it gives it a sort of operatic, grand, tragic ending kind of thing, which, should see the characters. Again, this is where the costume, the idea of somebody patched together, sort of unraveling, was a good image. It sort of externalizes the character.
Your blood, Max.
My blood. I gave at the office.
A half pint. I'm talking gallon.
Let's make it be. They're my blood. What can I do for you?
Sorry, Max. A die for a die.
When I'd get all of them on the stage at the same time, I would start laughing because, first of all, to get them all on the stage at the same time was difficult because of just all the technical things. And, it was funny. And I mean, I think sometimes they probably thought, what was I laughing at? But if they could have seen what I've seen, they would have probably laughed too. I mean, we would all occasionally, they might start laughing because they were just going insane, but they got the absurdity of it a lot of the time because you couldn't help it.
Selina, don't you see?
I like this scene too. Again, this one, I think I got some flack for this one too about him revealing himself. That for some reason seemed to create some controversy. Again, I don't quite know why, because it felt like part of it to me, and especially given the way these two characters have been back and forthing, it's like I felt like you wanted a moment like that where it was kind of him opening up kind of for the first time. What I felt is, this was my interpretation and it fit the story and that he, revealed himself to her and it just seemed very appropriate.
I just couldn't live with myself. So don't pretend this is a happy ending.
Selina Kyle. You're fired. And Bruce Wayne. Why are you dressed up like Batman?
Because he is Batman, you moron.
Was.
The thing about Michelle, she's like a laser beam, she just right in there and again, this sort of tragic kind of death kind of thing. I mean, I was amazed because I'm not a big fan of gunfire. So I found this actually quite disturbing and shocking and quite emotional to me. I mean, I enjoyed this part of it. And again, I sort of hand it to the studio for allowing, because, nowadays I think they'd get freaked out about something like this for a movie like this. Is, you can't shoot a woman, like that point blank range kind of a thing, but, I felt it was strong in part of it. And, it was a strong thing to do, and that, not to get too upset about it. It was great. Here's where the black shake starts. Yep. See, I tried to get them to do that, but they wouldn't go for it. They do a green shake and I tried to say, well, there's green in there. It's not completely black. If you look closely, there's some green in there. Again, for these characters, they have a tragic beginning and middle, and it just that sort of opera tragedy goes with this material.
Kill. He's got some hair.
See, for me, I like the prolonged tragic death. To me, it's part of the, the people they go like, oh, well, it's to this or to that. You're going, well, here's a man who's dressed as a bat. It doesn't get any more operatic than that in a certain way. I mean, it's like, in fact, there was, what's that opera? De Fledermaus is the bat, it is an opera. And it's like, well, yeah, you can see why it's an opera, because it's such a grand sort of, Phantom of the Opera kind of thing, where, to me, and like monsters' deaths was always, like in Ray Harryhausen, the history of monster movies, the monster's death, King Kong, their death is the thing that, one of the big points of the movie. So that's why it kind of went on for a little bit of time for me. For some people, maybe goes on a little long, but like for me, it's nice to sometimes let the music play out. Just let the things play out a little bit. The ambiguous nature of Catwoman, you start out when you see the creation with the cat coming around it. It's not like it's not like supernatural, but we feed into this sort of mythology a little bit of cats and 9 lives and all of that sort of thing. So in the same way, with Batman wanting to keep his sort of mystery, we sort of treated the same idea with Catwoman a little bit, and not sort of come right out with it. It's not supernatural, but it's not, you don't really know, and so that just seemed like part of the material and part of her, that sort of ambiguous 9 life aspect, black cat, supernatural mystery. I think what I came away with from this was, again, just the opportunity to work with these people, to kind of try to do Batman, but try to do something else. It was a tricky balance to do. Beyond that, the other aspects of it, the merchandise, all that stuff that is now become such commonplace stuff was not things that I probably handled well or dealt well with or liked. So the movie is the movie, and that's really all. I care. Especially when you're making it and you've got a fairly short schedule, you've got to be you get a huge job just to make the movie. And, so all this other stuff is necessary to them, the studio and all the people. But for me, it's just more of a problem and distraction. And, it's hard for me to tell, a toy company what something's going to look like when I don't even know myself. You get into that kind of stuff. And, and then you keep wondering why make a movie in like several months, and it takes, them the same time to make a t-shirt. There's a weird, it's a weird time warp, with like how long you have and then how long they have and need. I feel pride in this movie. I feel close to it. There are lots of aspects of it that I love. And, I don't know if I would do another sequel ever. And I don't think, I was sort of interested to kind of, because I actually toyed with doing a third, and I kind of realized that after this movie, I remember going into a meeting sort of toying with the idea of it and them trying to talk me out of it. I think they got a lot of flack from what I don't know this for sure, but I think they got a lot of flack from their tie-in partners on this movie. And so I think they were probably happy that I didn't do another one. I guess everybody should be happy that I didn't do another Batman, so you don't have to listen to another Batman commentary. So, but thank you for listening, and bye.